Hello,
Hello.
everyone. How are we doing? Hey, Ian. How are you?
Hey. Hi, Ellie. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new Creative Maxon series. I'm Ellie, and this is Ian, and we are both senior trainers at Maxon. And yeah, we're taking over April, doing some fun stuff. Basically, I had this really silly idea where I thought it'd be fun to create a perfume ad, roped in Ian. Which way are you? This way, wrong way.
Yeah.
Roped in Ian to help me with the modeling, and then also roped in Max, who's going to be color grading it, and he's going to be here in the final week. And so, yeah, today we're going to be talking about the ZBrush side of things, and then next week it's a little bit different. So I thought I'd talk about it. So normally we do 4 or 5 Wednesdays in a row. Because of NAB and things like that, and everyone's been away, we've actually missed the first couple of weeks. And so we're doing this Wednesday. We're then doing next Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'm doing back to back, which is going to be the C4D side of things, then the Redshift side of things. Then the next week, we're going to be doing the Red Giant and the color grading. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting.
Yep. Oh, I'm super excited.
I'm also super excited. I'm also excited to chill during this first session and hand things over to you. But first of all, what I want to do is say hey to everyone in the chat. So hey to ATD Films, Lily, Lelis, Jermaine and Brian, thanks for joining. And hey to the rest of you watching across the various channels, everything from Maxon to ZBrush to the Maxon training team. Don't forget, this is recorded, gets timestamped thanks to the amazing Dr. Sassy, but it will only last on the Maxon training team YouTube channel. It won't be on the rest. And we also have some project files available. So let me just put them in there. So this is a link that you can use over the next 3 weeks. So right now you're going to have the ZBrush files on there. As of next week, you'll have the C4D and the Redshift. And then the following week, you'll have whatever Max supplies us with. So feel free to download those.
Exactly. And real quick, too, before Ellie finishes up her real spiel, I'm going to answer this question right here, which is, can this tutorial be done with the free version of ZBrush for iPad? I'm going to be showing some tricks on how you can use the free version in order to create something very similar to it. But this one is a little bit more focused on ZModeler, which is the latest update for ZBrush for iPad. And that is with the paid version. So just wanted to let you guys know that I will be showing some free version tips and tricks as we move along with it.
Cool. So as a little teaser, let me just share my screen. And so this is a rendered still of the perfume bottle, or very similar to the perfume bottle that Ian is going to model today inside of ZBrush. We decided that we're not going to show you the final animation, maybe because it's not done, maybe because it is. So we thought we'd do it as a bit of a teaser for you next week instead. But I think, intro done. It's probably time to hand over to you, Ian.
Yeah, we could do that. That sounds amazing. As always, of course. So let me know when you can see my full ZBrush.
Let me just add that in. Also, as a reminder, don't forget to ask any questions. There should be a chat system inside of YouTube where you can ask us your questions. And so, yeah, feel free if you have any questions on ZBrush or on anything to do with anything that we're doing, then yeah, feel free. And as ATD said, do we get a ZBrush iPad glove?
Oh, so that we've been working on trying to see what we could do with the ZBrush gloves. This is an oldie but a goodie. This goes back. I've had this one for years. It's one of my favorites. So I can't officially answer that right now, but I've been putting little nudges and things for people who run the merch store to maybe one day do it. We'll see, but I can't promise now. So sorry.
Just keep
Yep.
asking.
That's it. Just keep asking. Yeah, that's what I will be doing. So, okay, can everybody see my ZBrushy? That's what I'm calling
can.
All right, perfect. So, hi everyone. So today we're going to be really talking about how I made this. Now I'm going to try to keep this within the hour. So we have about a good 55 minutes to go through this whole process. One of the things that I want to call out is, of course, anytime we're working on anything in ZBrush, ZBrush is basically, if you're new to ZBrush, think of it as an asset creation tool. It is a sculpting tool, but it also does hard surface, organic and inorganic surfaces. And when Ellie came to me with this idea, she was like, I just need a perfume bottle. And while that might seem simple on the surface, which it mostly is, at the same time, there were little things that we had to go ahead and consider. And so first and foremost is, of course, pulling some sort of reference. So I went to Google and just referenced real quickly, like perfume bottles. Also, you could probably just go into your bathroom if there's a perfume bottle in there and see how they are shaped. And this one in particular kind of stood out to me as being very close to like what is I would consider typical perfume or cologne bottle. So I went with something a little bit along these lines. But one of the things to note, and we'll call it out real quick before we get into it, is of course that if I turn on the wireframe, we have geometry on the inside. And this is super important because we are dealing with glass, and bottles have, of course, two sides, double-sided geometry. So we have two sides to consider, which is some of the ways that you're gonna, like Ellie's gonna talk about when she's going into rendering, why it's important to have double-sided geometry and have liquid intersect with it to make sure that the render looks as realistic as possible. So that is kind of some of the stuff we'll be covering. But of course, this is just it. We'll just pull up the pieces real fast. Let's go ahead and solo this, and then we'll get into the modeling process. I tried to keep the modeling as simple as possible, but also really keeping the cleaner geometry as much as we possibly could. So for example, I'm going to just come through, and you can see here, like, it's not super complex. Also, let me pick a better material because this is a little reflective. So let's go with Skin Shade 4. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to look at. Yeah. And then, so as we step through, you can see that the geometry is not super complex. This is probably the most complex of it. But again, it's actually it's a lot of cylinders. And that's first and foremost is recognizing the shape language and what it is that we're going into. So if we were to look at like polygroups and I just auto that real quick, you can see here, this is this main shape here. And then this is this main shape here. And of course, we were able to achieve a lot of this just using ZModeler. So without further ado, we're going to basically just recreate this on the fly. So one of the tips I'm going to show you right now is, of course, if we press any one of these tool palette menus, either Subtools or we press the tool menu itself, up here at the very top where my pencil is, you can just drag that off and that could become a floating palette, making it really easy to open and navigate with that window open when we need to. So for something like this, I'm just going to put all this in a folder so we can kind of hide it. So I'm going to open up the Gizmo. I'm going to turn on this little pizza box right here, which is right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and press and hold Control Shift. And we're just going to drag and make sure we have everything selected. And then with this menu open, we're going to hit folder, and it's going to tell us, do we want to put everything that's selected into a folder? And of course, we want to say yes. And then we can call this whatever we need to. We'll just call this bottle so that I can spell something correctly, and then we'll end up hiding that. So now that's all in there. And let's go ahead and just press new. And we're going to go ahead and start with some of the most basic shapes, which is, of course, the bottle itself. So we're going to go ahead and say, let's get a cube 3D. Now, I inserted that, and one of the things I want to call out is that when you insert something, whatever subtool I had selected, even though the folder was, quote, hidden, it's going to go ahead and put that underneath the selected item. So if you want to avoid that and not have to drag everything down, let's go ahead and hide that one more time. We could actually come in here and say append instead, and then that will kick that cube all the way to the bottom and not in a folder. So we can just now have that, and then we could put this in our own folder if we wanted to, and we'll call this stream build. Now, of course, like Ellie said, you guys can ask any question along the way. And so if you do have questions, feel free to stop me. But one of the things before we start getting into the ZModeler aspect of it, I mentioned in the first comment that we shared, can you do this along with the free version? And the things that you typically would use when doing this is either Live Boolean or ZModeler, which those are included in the paid version. For the free version, if you want to cut a hole in something or you want to hollow something out, there's a technique that is Dynamesh subtraction. And the way that works, and this will be for the free version, is I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this cube real quick. And I'm going to just scale this up. And basically, we're going to push a hole through this real fast, just so you can kind of see that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to The thing I want to use is the cutting tool. I'm going to long press that subtool, and I'm going to come down to Boolean process, and I'm going to set it to subtraction. And that's the most important step. And then from here, I'm going to come up to the tool above it that I want to be cut. And we're going to go ahead and under Subtool, we're going to go merge and merge down and say OK. And I already just totally made a mistake right now, which I'm going to call out, which this stuff needs to be in Dynamesh. So let's split this off one more time. You can tell it's early for me. I'm also in California. So yeah, I'm still waking up. Don't mind me. But let's go ahead and go to Subtool and go to Split. And let's set both of these to Dynamesh. So I'm going to long press the Dynamesh button at the bottom. If you don't know any one of these buttons, if it has a little arrow key to it, that's a long press action. So let's set this to a Dynamesh action. And then let's press and hold Alt and tap this guy. And let's do that as well. We'll set that to Dynamesh. And now let's set that to a subtraction. There we go. Now Ian is awake. So from here, we'll come up to the cutting tool is set to subtraction. The cutter, or the thing that's going to be cut rather, is going to be just set normal. And then we'll go ahead and we'll say merge down. And the thing you'll notice when that happens is that a white polygroup shows up on the cutting tool. And that is because white in the white polygroup in ZBrush is used as a temporary polygroup selection, but it also can be used for a cut. So now what we can do is just reactivate Dynamesh by pressing and holding Control and dragging in an empty surface and letting go. And now that cuts a hole through your mesh. And so again, this is a Dynamesh subtraction service. So both objects need to be Dynamesh. One of them needs to be set to the subtraction before merging, and then you can go ahead and just redo it and it'll cut that tool. And that is available in the free version. So that's how you can kind of work around the live Boolean aspect of it as you're moving through. So if I use live Boolean or I use ZModeler to push something back or to cut a hole, that's what you want to do. Any questions on that before we proceed?
I think we're good. We did have a quick one sort of wondering if we can, Shafi was wondering, do you need ZBrush for iPad or can you use the desktop version for this?
Oh, you could absolutely use the desktop version for that. One of the cool things about this project was, and the reason why we're showing ZBrush for iPad is A, it's our newest version of ZBrush, of course, but B, when Ellie asked me if I could do this, I was literally at an airport. And so I just was like, yeah, I'm waiting for my flight. I have 2 hours. I can put something together really quickly. And the model I presented to her was actually done in about an hour's time. And it's just because I had ZBrush with me at all times. So, and also too, it's just the fact that, again, ZBrush for iPad is new and there's not a lot of content on it right now. And we want to also push that. But everything I do in ZBrush for iPad can absolutely be created on the desktop version. So absolutely. Great question. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just start making into it. So some of the things that I did here real quick was anytime that I'm going to be using ZModeler as the main tool for what we're doing, I like to think of ZModeler or any hard surface techniques done with the Gizmo and with ZModeler. Those two tools combined is like my hard surface dream. So here, I'm going to just, with any subtool I have selected, we don't have to go all the way back in time. I can just open up the Gizmo and I can pick this PolyCube right here. And what this does is it takes any subtool and changes it into a very clean geometry cube. And this makes it really simple and easy to do. And one of the things that we're looking at right now is, of course, we have these cones here. We have a red, blue, and green cone. And what these cones allow us to do is we can drag and slide over what kind of geometry that we would like. And now I usually just kind of come through and maybe drag a few different things, but then I always have at least one line in center on the x-axis so that symmetry works perfectly fine. And then from here, we're just going to go ahead and start shaping this out. So we'll hit the gear icon again. We'll go to the Gizmo. And of course, we know what our bottle looks like. So we're just going to go ahead and use the scale factors to get a shape that looks something like what we would want. Say something like this. There we go. Now, of course, if you think, okay, I started moving stuff, but I realized I wanted to have another edge line in there, you can come back to PolyCube, but just know that when you do that, what ends up happening is that when I start making that cube again, or trying to readjust, the edge loops, maybe something like this, it's going to reshape it back to that cube while that is still active. So just so you're aware that that's going to happen, because that's how this was designed. So we want to make sure that we just set the thing that we need to, but then that's where ZModeler is going to come into play. So we'll just re-extend that real quick. And then let's go ahead and turn off the gizmo. And we're going to open up ZModeler. So I have it in my favorites, which if you don't know, any brush that you have, if you just long press it at any point in time, it will ask you if you want to add that to your favorites. So here you go. We can do that. So I have it in my favorites, but if you come here to all down here on the, I say down here, but on the right-hand side of the menu is actually the letter in which you could select any brush that you have. So here, if I press Z, or I just scroll all the way to the bottom, it will go ahead and be right there. And you can see I actually have some custom brushes that I've purchased or have made and put in here. So here's like some of Pablo Munoz's stuff, or ZBrush guides. Grab that. Now I have ZModeler. Now, there's going to be a lot of, obviously, a tutorial aspect to this. So don't mind my long-winded rants, because that happens. But when you open up ZModeler for the first time, you'll notice that you have a polygon extrude, you have an edge loop, and then you have a point. Now, this actually can be long pressed here at the top and dragged off into something that's a little bit more comfortable. So if you're used to using your right hand to use, or your left hand, whichever your dominant hand is, to open this menu quickly, but you don't want to, you don't want to use your opposite hand for that, you can put this pretty much wherever you want. And sometimes I actually put it over here on the right-hand side. And if you switch brushes, it will disappear and move out of your way. But as soon as you open up your ZModeler again, it appears exactly where you left it, which makes it nice. From here, now we can start manipulating a few things. So I have an edge loop. So of course, if I open this up, you're going to see a lot of different menus here. But what makes this different from the desktop version is, of course, the fact that we have color coding on here, and everything's kind of in now a menu sort of base. So you have topology and transform and selection, and all of these can be collapsed at any point in time. So if you are just pretty much always used to just being in the modeling side of things, then you can collapse that, or you can open it up and you can navigate through this space however you need. However, one of the coolest things is up here at the top called My Presets. And My Presets allows me to quickly make different presets that I can access really fast. And the easiest way to do that, and you're going to see a lot in this tutorial, is just long pressing either the edge, face, or point, and then that will pop up those different things. So here I have a preset called Insert Multi Edge Loop. So if I grab that, that's automatically going to allow me to drag and create those different edge loops as I need. So now I could just come through here and give me some decent geometry. And of course, with our symmetry turned on, it allows me to do something pretty quickly, and I can get my edge loops in there as I need to. Now, the thing that I preach a lot when I talk about modeling anything is don't worry about the details. Let's just focus on the main shape, or the basic, silhouette of it. So the other tool that I'm going to be using is just simply our insert, our IMM insert geez, I can't speak today. Our IMM brush, or IMM primitive brush, which is right here. And I usually have that set to favorites as well. So IMM primitive tools, and that's how we're going to start building. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, and I have now my different edge loops here. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab the cylinder with no edges. And we're just going to go ahead and drag this on the top and get something like this. And if you don't know, if you actually drag this out really big and then move your brush up without letting go, you can have it longer and skinnier if you need to. So there's a few different ways that you can do that. And we're just going to set that there. And notice that it masked off the thing that we drew on. And that is because it's trying to protect the surface that you're on and just allow you to work with what you've now inserted, which is super important. Any questions so far? I tend to just blah.
No, it's good. It's good. We've had a couple who are sort of looking to try follow along with what you're doing, which I think is great. And they were curious of how you're getting like the tools and the menus up. I think there was sort of one from Shafi just saying like, how are you getting to the tools that you're using? Is there a particular way or method that you use?
So for brushes in particular, I typically will just open right here on the left-hand side of my screen. I will just open up, of course, my brush menu, because that is the brush menu right there. So I'll open that up, and then I'll either just, if I know what I'm looking for, like ZModeler, if I don't have anything under favorites and it's all on the all side, I'll just go to the bottom. I know ZModeler is Z, it's the last on the list, and I'll be able to grab that. So I just come in and I just typically go through the normal process of just grabbing that brush. Also too, at the bottom, I do create custom toolbars. So I do have something for like my normal character block out stuff. And then I have stuff for my hard surface. And some of these are custom brushes, and some of these are brushes that ship with ZBrush. So I will typically kind of go through the process of just coming into the brush menu and just finding the brush that I want. My biggest advice to you is favorite all the brushes that you know you use on a regular basis. That's going to really help you navigate quickly. And that's the point of favorites. So anytime you close the brush menu and open it back up, whatever menu you're on last, like here's chisel, it's going to stay in that menu. So I always just stay in favorites. And so I'll just open that up and then just grab what I need and close it and just move on. So that's the easiest thing I can do. For the ZModeler brush specifically, like I said, I tend to undock this because it's usually docked right here on this side. I will typically undock this by long pressing and putting this where I'm comfortable. The idea is that ZBrush has always been designed for speed, first and foremost, allowing you to move and navigate as quickly as possible. However, that being said, everybody works differently. That's where the custom UI comes in. So putting things where is comfortable for you is a little bit of trial and error. But once you kind of know how you work, then being able to place things where you need them is going to be super important. And hopefully that helped answer that question.
Yeah, brilliant. I think while you were talking as well, a couple came in, if that's cool.
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
So one here was saying, I've updated today, but under all, I only have Z Project or ZRemesher, but no ZModeler. Could that be the free version or?
Are the ZModeler ships with the pro version, or the paid version rather. So my first question is, are they on the free version? Maybe try signing out and signing back in if you are on the paid version, because maybe it just like maybe it glitched or something like that. So if you are on the paid version, just kind of sign out and sign back in. That sometimes will fix it. But if you're on the free version, you won't be seeing ZModeler because that only ships with the paid version.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, they said they're on the paid. So yeah, try the sign in and out option.
Yeah,
hopefully that helps. And then if not, let us know and we can ping you to support. And there was another question from Navi saying, I'm new to ZBrush and I wonder if there's a way to know the measurements of your objects.
For ZBrush for iPad or ZBrush desktop or either. So
it doesn't say. So if you know a way in both, that'd be great.
Yeah. So one of the ways to do in ZBrush for desktop, first and foremost, there is Scale Master, which usually helps you measure a thing. And the way you would do that on the desktop version, which is the same way you would try to do that on the iPad version, is long press the gizmo, and you can turn on your transpose line. And then from here, if you actually start dragging and stuff like that, it might be a little hard to see, but if you start dragging up here at the top, you're going to see that this says 4.745 units. Again, it's whoops. So if I just go ahead and click on one point and I start dragging and I click on the other, right up here at the top, it says 4.745 units. So you are aware, a unit in ZBrush is a millimeter by default. There's no Scale Master currently on the iPad version, but if you think about units being millimeters, that will give you a great idea on how big something is. So that is the way that you can measure. And with the transpose, it actually snaps to point. But a trick that you can do is if you just drag anywhere and then you hold shift, it's going to keep that in a line so you don't accidentally, kind of have it like cockeyed or anything like that. So you can actually press and hold shift and that will snap. And then when you feel that point, it'll be right up here at the top. So that's how you can measure on both iPad and desktop. And then when you're done, you just, again, long press that and switch it back to the Gizmo if you want to use the Gizmo. Or you can keep using the transpose, which is a very old, this predates the Gizmo for moving and rotating and scaling. But that's how you can measure something. And great question.
Cool. Cool, thanks.
Man.
Yeah, I'll let you move on. Also, really quickly on that update, a few of the people in the chat were saying, this is Ash and Josh Fry were saying they had to sign out and back in. Josh said you might need to force an update in the App Store too. So yeah, try those things out just to be sure.
Exactly, absolutely. Okay, cool. So now here is, we'll move on to the fact that we have our basic shape right here. Now this, this little guy up here, we're gonna go ahead and kind of, I realize now it's a little too tall for what I'm looking for because, it's a bottle, but obviously we're gonna have a lid and all the other stuff. So I'm gonna press and hold Shift and Control, and I'm just gonna tap this blue top cylinder, and I'm just going to press and hold Control and tap in the empty space to mask it off real fast. And then I'm going to go ahead and press Shift and Control to bring that back. I also could have just done this where I mask this one and bring it back because I'm going to be editing this guy. So whichever is easiest for you, of course. And then let's go ahead and unlock the Gizmo, recenter this, and we're just going to move this down to where it seems pretty good. Now here, I'm going to actually scale this just a little bit smaller because we do need a lid to cap it. And most lids on perfume or cologne bottles do not overlap the actual main bottle. So these are just like things I learned while looking at perfume bottles. So here, I'll just keep it a little bit smaller, but we're going to ultimately stitch these two together. And the way I stitch this together is actually using Sculptress. So here, I do want to point out that Sculptress, sorry, not Sculptress. Wow, yes, we are good today. Remesh by Union. That's what I want to end up using. Remesh by Union is what we're going to be using, and that is because here we're actually going to, be stitching it together. And in doing so, we want to be aware of the geometry on how it stitches. If I were to stitch this now, take a look at this giant cube here, 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 and here, and then take a look at all the little points within the cylinder. Now, to stitch this on basically 4 points versus maybe call it 8 points here, that's a lot of stitching. And if I were to do this, so let's just go ahead and open up the Gizmo. We'll turn off Symmetry, and we're just going to recenter this. I always recommend centering this when doing it. It's just a little tip that makes things consistent. Here, if I press the gear icon on the Gizmo and I say Remesh by Union, boom, look at that stitch job. That's crazy. Like that's going to give ZRemesher a very difficult time in getting some cleaner topology. And one of the things that I preach all the time is clean topology is definitely the best way forward. You always want to make sure your topology is as clean as humanly possible because it just makes your life easier, not just for animation, which of course that's what we were doing this for. The optimization is important, but here, like just to prevent myself from struggling with the mesh as I'm making something, this in itself is something that is just kind of catastrophic. So I'm going to 2-finger tap that back, and we're going to use ZModeler now with our multiple edge loop insert, and we're just going to give us some topology. Now, here's a cool thing for you to know. If I go ahead and drag out, let's say something like this, and I'm satisfied, but I want to repeat that action multiple times, I just touch one time, and it repeats that action. And that is super helpful. So when you're like dragging things out and you want things to be consistent, that's something that you can do. So like I'll drag this one out one more time and then I'll touch that and then those will be consistent. Let's do a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. So let's say something like that. Now when I stitch this together, so let's go ahead and open the Gizmo, come back through here, and then again, remesh by union. Boom, look at that. That's a lot better and a lot easier to deal with, and it's going to keep things a lot cleaner as a whole when you're going to ultimately ZRemesh something. So that is the first big tip on using remesh by union. Now, from here, we're not going to go into some crazy details yet. We're going to block out the rest of the thing. And of course, one of the things that we're going to need is, of course, the spray cap on it. If we come back to my subtools and I open this up and then I come here to the cap and we just kind of look at this, this is apprised of a few different things. Now, I knew we were dealing with glass, so of course, glass is see-through, and that's something that's super important to remember. So we want to make sure that we have not only the inside, but the outside. And you can be as detailed as you want, but it's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 cylinders, maybe not even 3 based on the polygroups here. So we're just going to kind of repeat this. So the way I built this was, of course, let's zoom out here. I'm obviously making this way bigger than the last one, but we're just going to go ahead, come into Subtool menu, and let's go ahead and insert. And let's do another cylinder, say something like this. Now we're going to turn solo mode off so we can see what we're doing. And now I'm just going to bring this in, and we're going to kind of put this, say something like this. Now, here's the cool part is we don't need to guess how big or small something is in ZBrush, especially when we're comparing it to another object or how much space we're leaving ourselves. We can just turn on the Subtool Transparency and here, turn the wireframe off for a second and maybe get a darker material so you can really see what's happening here. It might be a little too hard to see, but I actually can see through my other object. So if I press this guy, I can kind of see through, and I can even like turn on ghosting here or turn off ghosting so I get a better idea of it. But here I can see just how thick this outer one is, and if that's giving me enough space for what I'm looking for. And if not, we could just go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. But I think actually that was pretty good because we have to consider the cap going over it. So say something like this, and then we can just turn transparency back off whenever we need to. When I am working with any type of, when I'm working with ZModeler, I love having the wireframe on. It just makes my life a lot easier. So that's a little tip for you too. Now, n-gons, these little points where at least 5 or more points come together and creates a nice little lovely n-gon that does not subdivide very well. And just so you know what I'm talking about, if you've never seen an n-gon subdivide, it's quite beautiful. You can see all that kind of like threading, and it kind of just gives me a boat effect, and it's not really what I'm looking for. A little tip to use ZRemesher in order to get some cleaner topology, we'll solo this for a second, is to actually go ahead and press and long press the symmetry option and turn on symmetry. But of course, in ZBrush, you have our X. If we're looking at it with this cam guy facing us just like this, there he is right there. He's facing us, looking at us very intently. We have X coming from screen left to screen right. We have Y, which is up and down. And then we have Z depth, which is back and forth from this position, hence the name ZBrush with Z depth painting. So here, what we want to do is we want to actually focus on our symmetry coming on our X and our Z. So we can actually have those 2 points here. So we're going to be kind of doing like almost a radial ZRemesh. So we're going to have X and Z turned on, but we will not be using radial, and I'll show you why here in a second. So once we have this, we're going to come down to the bottom to ZRemesher, and I do a little like, this is kind of like my bread and butter, how I always ZRemesh, which gives me usually 9 times out of 10 the best results, which is I always start with the number of like 5 or maybe 10, depending on what it is. This is in thousands, so it's already set to 5,000. If we look over here at the total points, this is only 482. So 5 is a little high for that. So we could say maybe 1,000, which would give us some good points. But just know that this number is based in thousands, which when you're doing a character or doing something that's millions of vertices, don't be afraid to adjust that number to a higher one. And then even though I don't have any polygroups on right now, I'm going to go ahead and say keep groups, but turn that smooth groups down to 0. This just prevents any type of visual shrinking that might occur. And then I have a depth turned on, but adaptive size is basically meaning make the quads bigger or smaller depending on the shape and how it conforms. So I usually turn this down to about 0, sometimes 1 or 2, but 0 is typically where I leave it. And because we have some sharp edges here, I actually will also turn on detect edges for this. And now if you take a look at this mesh, if I go ahead and just ZRemesh it, you can see here I have a lot cleaner of a mesh, but that's too much. There's still a lot going on here, and we want to keep things simple. So I will actually say half, and I'll go ahead and do this a few times until I get something that's nice. But look at how clean that is. Like, that gives me a really nice, clean ZRemesh and consistent on both the top and the bottom. And that is because ZRemesher works with symmetry, and it's saying that X and Z needs to connect together to give us a nice clean representation. And with detect edges turned on, it might be a little hard to see in the stream, but there's a crease right here. And that creased edge will keep my shape exactly as I need it, which makes it a lot easier to work with. And then once we have this from here, now what's cool is we can go ahead and we can start making our model the way we would like it. So I'm going to go ahead and the old school way of like selecting different polygroups temporarily is pressing and holding Alt, and then going on the face and just coming through and like selecting a few of them. That's one way to do it. But another way that you could do it is this new button down here. If I click this, this is temporary polygroup turned on, which means I don't have to use my other hand to press and hold Alt. I can just come through and have that on, and then I can uncheck that at any point in time. And then again, I can long press, and I'm going to be QMeshing, meaning I'm going to be pushing this down. And if I want this to be a different polygroup, I can just tap Alt a few times. But I can bring this down, say something like that, which will give me exactly what I'm looking for. And what's fun about, and this is what's really cool about QMesh versus Extrude, because if I were just to extrude this, let's come back and I'll show that real quick. If I were to just extrude this, and let's just say all polygroups, let's go ahead and turn that off and come this down. Of course, it's going to extrude it. Nothing wrong with that. But what if I wanted to push a hole all the way through? See, now the extrusion is actually causing some colliding normals and stuff. But check this out. If I wanted to make a hole, in this case, I don't want to, but if I wanted to, I could come through. And if the geometry is pretty similar on both sides, and I drag this through, we're going to get a nice little fun crash like that. Good job, Ian. So let's try this one more time. Let's come through here, come through, and that will actually pop a hole through the actual mesh. Now, what happened beforehand, and what you guys just saw, was that there's probably just a little bit of not enough geometry in that mesh to do that. So that's actually kind of what happened. So we'll come through. Yeah, that actually might be a little bit of a funky bug. So we'll report that. But on smaller surfaces, say something like this, they'll pop through and it should give us a hole. Wow, that is acting weird today. So yes, fun stuff. Okay, cool. Usually that works out fairly well. It's usually my go-to. Let's go through here. There we go. Yeah, so it's just probably not enough geometry supporting it, but that's one of the ways that you can do that. And you can plan for that if you ever need to pop a hole. Here, we don't need to do that. We're just going to push this geometry down a little bit and give us something like that. And again, you know, sometimes errors happen. And when things like that happen, I just want to call out that, like, I usually will contact support and be like, hey, this thing happened. And therefore, you know, just want to let you guys know so we could try to fix it. That's exactly what I'm going to do after the stream, because this is pretty clean. So that should have worked. So
Also,
if anybody asks,
say, if these things ever happen to you guys, then also report it and let us know. Because yeah, the more people who feed back and tell us the things that kind of aren't really working, then the more we can tell the developers, the support team, and you know, the more bug fixes we can get for new releases.
exactly. And just so you're all aware, especially if you're following along, if you think professionals don't struggle, I'm going to tell you, we struggle all the time. This happens to everybody. So
just wait till my weeks next week. I'm going to talk about all the challenges that I came across.
beautiful. So, and again, if we want to repeat this action, we could just tab it one time and it will push that down. So those are things that we could do. Now, here's something that's really, really cool. What if I want to actually like repeat this mesh, but on the bottom side? Okay, maybe that's something I want to do. Check this out. Open up your Gizmo, press and hold Control, and you can drag and duplicate that mesh. And then you can actually turn that around, scale this down, maybe elongate it, and that's our bottom, just like that. And then now we have our top and our bottom already made with the exact same thing. And that is one of the most useful tools. So again, press and hold Control, drag that. As long as it doesn't have subdivisions, then you can do this. So Dynamesh or non-subdivisions, you can turn that around. You can turn this and press and hold Shift to snap to every 5 degrees, keeping that nice and straight. And then I just scaled and pushed that down, and then boom, something like that, which will be perfectly cool. There we go. And then we'll just go ahead and clear that mask. And now we have this guy here. And now I'm going to just come back. And what's funny is, like, to the first question, can you do this with the free version? Like, we're just blocking out, and I use ZRemesher. Now, you won't have a lot of control in ZRemesher on the free version like I do in the paid version, but you can absolutely do a lot of what I've already showed you here. So this will be a lot easier for you to navigate as you move. But here, we're just kind of like blocking stuff out at the moment. And we're just going to position things however we need to. And it's a lot of kind of rinse and repeat, which is one of the things I love about working this way. And then here, okay, we'll fill this out one more time. Again, we'll go open this menu up, and let's go to our IMM Primitives, which I have stored in my favorites. And again, I'm going to have my cylinder with no edges selected. And then I'm just going to go ahead and drag out this new shape here. Come through, and of course, this is going to be the little spray lid that we need. So we're going to come through here and scale that like such. Perfect. And we can turn symmetry off and just make sure that that's truly centered, which is always super helpful, because if you have symmetry turned on but you're off on one side, it may not scale exactly as you want it. So you want to make sure that you're at least center. So we can see center here. We can even hit the home button and really make sure that that's truly center, just for the sake of arguments. I'm a little OCD about that sort of stuff, so I try to keep things as consistent as I can. There we go. And now I'm focused right here on leaving a little bit of a organic space, because when something gets rendered, you're going to have shadows. And because this is a functional piece on the actual bottle, when you spray it, it comes down and pops up because there's like a spring. Even though we're not building this 100% for quote manufacturing, I have to keep in mind that when this gets pressed, it comes back up, right? So there's going to be space between there, and that's something to also consider when you're making this. And now from here, one of the things that we can do if we want to work a little bit smarter and not so, on top of ourselves, we can actually just come here and split unmasked points or split mask points and have this piece just a separate piece while we work on it. Because I'll do solo mode a lot to kind of see what's going on and make sure that things work out the way I intend it. And again, I could ZModeler a bunch of edge loops, but I want this top to be nice and clean. So when it's subdivided, it looks good. When it renders, it looks good. So we're going to rinse and repeat our ZRemesher trick. So we're just going to come here. We're going to start with not 51. We're going to start with 1. Same thing, detect edges, turn our symmetry back on. And then from here, let's just go ahead and ZRemesh. Boop. And then go to half and retry that a few times till we get something that we like, which is pretty cool. Now, here's what's really fun is I will want to bevel this edge right here. And there's a couple ways I can do this. And the way that I'm going to show you today is actually using the creased edges to create a bevel. And so the way to do this is to come in here. We're going to come up to our geometry under our tool menu. And then we're going to scrub down. Sorry, geometry, not a Remesh. There we go. We're going to go to crease. And then if you've ever wondered what this button down here does, or slider rather, this bevel width, anywhere that there's a creased edge, if I just open this window back up, let's go ahead and pop that there. Anywhere there's a creased edge, I can literally just take this bevel and slide that. And that will give me a beveling, or at least a chamfer on the creased edge to at least the point up where the other edge loop is. And that's a really effective way of doing that. And then I could come in with ZModeler. So again, favorites, modeler, long press this. And I have a shortcut for insert interactive, which all that is it's multiple edge loops under insert edge, but down here under elevation, it's usually set to custom. I set this to interactive. And what this allows us to do is when we drag up or down, we get more edge loops. If I go left to the right, I actually get some rounding. So I can get something that looks like this. And that will be a nice little one. Now it's also doing it at the bottom because that was edged, because that was actually creased as well, but we're not going to see that. So for now on the tutorial, I'll ignore it and we'll just go ahead and do that. Any questions so far?
So, not necessarily on the things that you're talking about, but there were a few earlier. Guitar Journey was wondering about adding custom brushes onto the iPad and sort of like, can you? How can you?
Yeah, no worries. So I'll show that real quick. Easily, what you can do is up here at the top on the paid version, on the top left-hand side, we have import. And usually what I'll do is I will load my brushes onto an external hard drive or thumbnail, and then I will plug that into my iPad. Or you could just put these on like some sort of Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever you have, and then just save them onto your iPad. And then if you have the hard drive plugged in, you don't have to save them onto your iPad directly, but it's helpful if you can. And so from here, you could just go to import, go to brush, and say select a file. Now, one of the things I recommend is if you go to iPad and you go into ZBrush, and then you go into your Z startup, you have your brush presets. And then I literally just drag them into here. So I have a ton of custom brushes as well as some of my other ones. So like the orb brushes, the ZBrush guides brushes, SK brushes. I also have 3D character workshop brushes because shout out to Shane Olson. So those are the things that I bring in there, and then they load every time and they just sit on your iPad. And then that's how you would do that. Now, we only have so much time. I will be live streaming after this live stream on the ZBrush channel for a couple hours as well, doing some 3D print prep. So if you're watching on the ZBrush live channel, once this is over, I'll be a few minutes late, but we'll be doing that there. But I do want to finish the making of this here real quick. So I'm going to probably move just a little fast, but it is recorded. But here, to get that kind of spray bottle hole on the actual mesh, all I did was I came through and I went to the point on this side. And again, you can actually split our mesh, and this can create a nice little ring. So I can come through here and I can split this just like that. And notice it's giving me a polygroup, which is something that we absolutely want. And from here, with QMesh already selected, I can go ahead and press this back and give me this nice little ring. And then I can create another ring right here. Again, tapping Alt to give us a different polygroup. And then I can push this down like this, which will give us that nice effect. And of course, if we were to subdivide, or in this case, if I were to use dynamic subdivision, you can see here, the mesh is nice and clean. If I turn the wireframe off, it's giving me a nice, good look for it. And again, that's all the way back here. So we're getting a nice, clean look, which is awesome. And I recommend using dynamic subdivision to test your geometry to make sure it's good. But also, this is why I absolutely come through and make sure that I have my wireframe on as I work. It just makes life a lot easier as a whole. And then again, we talk about blockouts and stuff like that. So if I press and hold Alt and I tap this under mesh here, one of the other things that I did was, of course, is that we made a straw. So I'm going to come to my subtool menu, and we're going to insert, and I'm going to bring in a cylinder 3D, and we're going to turn off the bottle here. Turn solo back on. We'll turn off the bottle, but we'll keep the actual top cap on because we want to make sure that we're able to add, quote, our pickup straw. So say something like this. Now, and the render, it's kind of bent a little bit. And that's because one of the things that I, quote, thought about was, it is hollow. but B, it's organically bending. It's not going to just be straight down. So one of the things that I did here is using ZModeler to hollow it. First and foremost, we're going to come up to our tool menu and we're going to go to PolyGroups, and then we're going to go group by normals. And that will give us this nice shape here. And then I'm going to press and hold Shift and Control and tap this outer polygroup, and that's going to hide the top and the bottom. And then we're going to delete hidden, which is geometry. And then we go down to the bottom, modify topology, and of course, delete hidden. So now this is single-sided geometry. But then with our QMesh, just go ahead and mesh that out. And that's going to go ahead and give me that shelled look. And that's like the super easy way to hollow something. And then to give it a little bit of a bend, we just open up the Gizmo and we hit the gear icon, and then we go to bend curve. And if you've never used bend curve before, what's fun is you're actually able to grab a point and move it around. Now notice we only have 2 points at the moment, but we also have all of these cones, the cones on top of cones, which is super cool. But they all do something different. If you hover over it, this one smooths, this one does symmetry, this one does axis Z, etc. But what you could do is right here at this top one, this little cone, is curve resolution. If I grab this, it's going to give me a couple different ones. So now I can actually bend this a little bit, say something like this. And then if I turn back on my shell here, and I kind of compare where everything is at, notice that's not even long enough. So we can go back in history. Let's turn on our actual solid or subtool transparency. And check this out. If we actually unlock this and put this towards the top, and then I can scale from that point instead of scaling from middle and then readjusting. I just scale from that point, and that should be good enough for what we're going for. And then I can go ahead and recenter that. And then I can come in to the Gizmo, bend curve. It remembered my points, but I can reduce this just a little bit. And then I can kind of do something like that. There we go. Now, the only thing we need to do is shell it, and then we clean up the geometry, and then maybe add a lid or two and stuff like that. But it's a lot of what I've already been doing. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So from here, we're just going to go to the shelling process, which I use live boolean for. But like I showed in the beginning, if you're using Dynamesh, then you can use the Dynamesh subtraction if you're on the free version. Let's just go ahead and accept that change, and we'll leave that just like such. Or let's actually go back real quick. Now, because my OCD is taking over, go back to bend curve. If you leave it active, you can actually always have it kind of like, so it's editable until you absolutely need it. So you actually don't even need to actually commit to that. You can just leave that, and then you can see this icon is now orange. If the gear icon is orange, just means you have an active deformer, but it's still showcasing. It means you can edit it whenever you need. And that's really good when you're trying to make sure that you're not editing where you're like, geez, I can't speak today, so sorry. But it's non-destructive at that point. There we go, and we would get there. So let's go and shell our lid. Are there any questions before I do that?
Not really. I was just kind of answering one from Chris, which it's quite an interesting sort of question and statement. He was sort of saying, obviously, this type of modeling can be done inside of C4D. Are there any specific benefits to modeling a shape like this using ZBrush, or is it personal preference? I responded with, this can obviously be done on an iPad on ZBrush from anywhere, or on C4D it can't. But what's your sort of thoughts? I think it's an interesting question. What are your thoughts being the ZBrush guy?
No, it's a super great question. So one of the reasons why we're showcasing what I would call a simplistic model for ZBrush for iPad is one of two things. One, you would actually be surprised how often I get ZBrush can't do hard surface. And that's like super surprising to me, since literally my buddy and colleague Paul Gabry has spent like his whole career pushing hard surface in ZBrush. But two, it's because it was mobile. Yes, you can absolutely do this in C4D 100%. And if you're a Z4D guy, absolutely you can do it. But what's good about something like this project for ZBrush whether it be desktop or iPad, this is actually one of the best ways, in my opinion, to teach how to get started in ZBrush. So ZBrush is designed for speed and performance. I'm literally throwing shapes together and then making it work. Because I concepted this bottle, it took me about an hour at the airport to get this done. Now that I know what I'm doing, we could have been done with this within 15 minutes because I know the things I need to put together, which is super fast. And that's not to say the C4D can't be that fast, because I've seen a lot of cool things, and C4D is super fast. But as somebody who's not an expert in C4D, but was tasked to model a thing, I'm choosing to use ZBrush. So it's a little bit of personal preference, but also this is a great way to teach how to get started in ZBrush. So it's a fantastic question. Obviously use the tool that is most effective for you. That's what I'm always going to preach as an artist myself. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, again, it's more about exposing the tools and how it can be done using certain tools. What makes ZBrush for iPad so unique is that as a sculptor, for the first time, as a ZBrush artist, I'm actually mobile, and that's really cool. And so this was something that's like, hey, can you do this thing? And I was at the airport and I said yes, and I was able to do it. So I was able to work anywhere in the world, and that was really cool.
Cool.
Yep. So now that we have this basic shape here, let's go ahead and just use light boolean real quick. Now, the same thing I mentioned about stitching here. Whoops, let's go back. Okay, the same thing I mentioned about stitching here is the same thing I'm going to be mentioning about light boolean. The quality of geometry is going to matter when you use light boolean. If I were to boolean this right now with this stitched, I'm going to get all of this on the internal, and that's not going to be good. So what I want to do is I want to ZRemesh this as well. So, and the same thing, you know, that's about, right now I'm looking at this being about 1.3 thousand, so 1,300. So here I'm going to go ahead and go to ZRemesher. Well, I'll actually give it 2. We'll do keep groups, and we'll do smooth groups here, and then we'll do our detect edges, and then adaptive size down. And of course, before I hit that, let's turn on our symmetry, and let's turn on our X and Z, so then it's looking at everything as it needs to be. And from here, let's go ahead, ZRemesher, and let's ZRemesh that and give us some pretty good geometry out the gate. Now, again, I went through and optimized this as much as I can, and that's a little bit of trial and error, but we're running out of time and I don't, you know, so take your time with this, but I would easily come in and just be like, okay, well, let's half this again and let's make sure that this is as clean as possible. But I want the internal to be pretty nice as well. So we'll leave it like this. And from here, we're going to go ahead and go to our tool menu. And for this one, I'm actually going to pull this out of this menu here, or this folder. And I'm going to put it in its own folder because I like to have things when I do cutting in its own folder. So I'll call this a bottle cut. There we go, say something like that. And then we're going to duplicate this. So I'm going to go ahead, long press it and duplicate. And now from here, I'm going to turn on our transparency. And then I'm going to go ahead and scale this down and adjust this in a way that makes sense. So we'll scale this down a little bit. And then what's fun is seeing how many wall thicknesses are very different in an actual perfume bottle. It usually has a pretty thick bottom to keep the bottle bottom heavy so it doesn't tilt over time when the perfume liquid gets less and less, because then the bottle becomes a little off balance. So you'll see that typically perfume bottles will be thicker at the bottom. So we're going to adjust for that and just keeping an idea of like the different wall thicknesses here. And then again, we'll come up like this. So say something like that. And now one of the cool things with ZBrush is that, of course, I can mask off this top edge, come over here, and I'm going to want to pop this through the hole a little bit. So if I just come over here, let's turn solo mode on. I'm going to now turn off my symmetry, come up here to the very top of it. So I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to move this up here like that. And then that exact trick that I showed you guys, where we actually did a object duplicate by pressing and holding Control, you could do that with an edge loop as well. So I can come through here, press and hold Control, drag the edge loop like that. And that's going to give me more geometry right there. And now I can go ahead and set this to a subtraction. And then we turn on live Boolean. And there we go. That's now cutting. Now I want to pay attention to that geometry down at the bottom. So we want to make sure that we kind of place this in a way that makes sense. There you go. And then from here, we're just going to go ahead. I can close this folder if I want, but I can long press this, and then I can go ahead and I can Boolean this folder and give me the shape that I need to. There we go. Off solo for a second. There we go. And that's the shape that I'm looking for here. And we could turn Boolean off, and we can activate our other things. And there's my main shape right there. If I turn on the wireframe, we have an internal as well as an external. Now, again, you're going to want to play with this as much as possible to keep it as clean as possible, but those are some of the ways that you can end up doing that. And then you can add some sculptural flair to this. You know, you can either come through, use curves, or sorry, not curves, you can use creasing to make it look really nice. So we can actually go to our like polygroups. We can say like group by normals. There we go. And then we can crease on that. So we can go geometry, we can do creasing, and then we can do crease our polygroups. But the slider right here, and this is something I play with a lot, the slider right here is called crease level. And when it's set to 15, that's going to be 15, like that's going to be sharp, super sharp creasing up to subdivision level 15. If I drop this down to, let's say 2, now if I were to come through, and again, I would actually optimize this. I would come through and ZRemesh it, but for the sake of the demo, we're going to go ahead and we're going to now just subdivide a little bit. And you'll see here that nothing really happened on that crease. Subdivision level 2. Now when I start dividing 3, 4, it's actually giving me a softer edge. And so if you don't want something super sharp, that's what you can end up doing. And then again, we're running out of time here, but at this point, I would just go through ZRemesh, clean it up, get everything looking pretty good, which then gives you this type of shape right here. And then for this, I just masked off this area. Like let's say we have this bottle where bottle's done. I wanted this divot. All I really did for this part is I came through, we'll just turn normal symmetry on for a second. There we go. And then I actually just went ahead and just selected an area. There we go. Yeah, because I have subdivisions on at this point. Actually, the subdivisions here are, there we go. Perfect. There we go. So I actually will delete this here. So here, all I did was I came through and I did a temporary selection, say something like this. There we go. Until I was satisfied with the shape that I needed. And then from here, what's cool is we also have masking ability. So I can either just press and hold, Shift, drag, and mask this out, soften that, and then use the gizmo, and then just kind of pull that back. Or don't soften it and just kind of get that nice little shape right there. And then when I subdivide, it's going to naturally do a fall off, which will give me that nice clean shape, which is how I ended up getting this shape here for then the labeling and stuff like that that Ellie ended up doing on her side. So yeah, that's pretty much how I made it. It's a lot of rinse and repeat. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this series here, because this was super fun to like kind of go through and make everything. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, if you just need to make something, this is where this was a lot of fun for me. It was easy to come through, make something really, really cool. Like I said, we felt that this was a really good like beginner tutorial, how to get into ZBrush for iPad and use the actual the ZModeler and some other tips and tricks just to kind of get a thing. But notice I try to keep it as simple as possible. I try not to overwork anything. I try not to sit there and like overcomplicate. I just block out what I'm looking for and then start refining and getting the very stuff that I need. So yeah. Any questions?
There are a couple which could be like a good like roundup. Also, a quick thing for people, when you were obviously creating like the thickness of the bottle, Obviously, when we then go into Redshift and we start adding the glass, that's going to affect the refraction. So thinking about that thickness that Ian was talking about is important, including the little kind of, I don't know, the embossing of that area is just going to add those extra details when we come to working with glass and refraction. So even though, like you said, it's a relatively simple model, those little extra sort of varying thicknesses and little bits of beveling, when we then throw on a relatively simple glass texture, it's just going to make it look really great.
Absolutely.
Where it doesn't need to be too kind of elaborate. Cool. Right. So a couple of final questions I think could be some good ending ones. From ATD, they're wondering, would you mind recommending your settings for the best use of the app? And also if there are any custom brushes that you think are sort of the ones that are worth grabbing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So as far as settings on how I navigate, I kind of keep it pretty default. I don't change too much, but I do turn finger sculpting off if up here at the settings. Actually, if you install ZBrush for the first time, like now, or there's like an update, typically it'll ask you a few questions, but I tend to have finger sculpting turned off because I like to rotate and I like to be in like this, and then I like to be able to navigate. So I turn that off for sure. And then as far as navigation, I always keep it set to X, Y, and Z axis with allow roll gesture turned on. And that is because I can zoom in and out, but then I can also pivot and rotate that, which is pretty cool. The blue little dots you're seeing is when we're actually connected to some sort of like OBS or recording mode. And then those show up naturally. It's kind of like our presenter mode. So that's something that we end up doing. And then I also keep center navigation pinch turned on. And then from there, these are my default speeds, rotate and zoom, 1.5 and 1.5. I think they're default at 1.5 now, but if not, then this is kind of where it's at. I do like this. I think it feels a lot better. If it's lower than this, like let's say it's like 0.75 and 0.75, the thing is that it just feels a little slow to me. And that's kind of a personal preference. So these are the settings that I feel like are pretty cool. Everything else I leave at default, which is awesome. So I tend to leave it there, especially because I teach it and I teach at a default mode. So I tend to do that. Some of the stuff that I didn't cover today, but we're going to be pushing a lot of like quick tip videos on, is of course our custom menus, like custom menus 1 and 2. The things that I always have in my custom menus are like mirror and weld, delete hidden, close holes, mirror, unify, delete loops, and auto groups. I use these all the time. And you don't want to constantly be coming into geometry and modify topology. It's a lot of digging. So I come here and I just kind of put them there, but it's important to know where they are. So if anybody asks like, oh, where'd you get that? Be like, oh, it's buried here. And then I also have another one, backface mask and AccuCurve. These are really good backface masks when you have super thin walls, but you want to sculpt and you end up pushing through a wall. You want to be able to only sculpt on one side. And so backface mask will actually keep that the backside of the double-sided geometry safe as you're sculpting. AccuCurve is really good for like points. So let's say I'm using my move brush. So I'll click move brush and let me just get like a simple sphere here. So on the normal move, if I do nice big, right, it looks like that, which is fine. But with AccuCurve turned on, it now gives me a point. And so this is really good when you need to like have something come to a point. And that's really, really helpful. And then of course you could turn that off. Fill color and flip, because flip normals tends to happen sometimes a lot, especially when you're like doing a lot of modeling and stuff and you're live boolean and stuff. Sometimes you can have an invert. So being able to flip it is helpful. And then this one right here, group mask clear mask. This is actually what most people on the desktop is Control W. So if I mask off a spot here like this, and I want to polygroup that, if I do that, it will polygroup it and then clear that mask. That's like Control W. It is Control W on the desktop. So for the iPad, I just have that as a quick menu because that's what that is. If you do have a Bluetooth keyboard and you're using that on the iPad, which I've tried, it's pretty cool. All the default hotkey shortcuts are working on there. So then you'll be able to just hit Control W at that point. So yeah. And then I have grow to polygroups and also split headed. Grow to polygroups is, let's say, for example, I have 2 different items like such. And actually, let's come over here and have this grouped here. But let's say I need to only select a portion of one. If I control shift and actually just select a small portion of it, if I do grow to polygroups, it will grow all of that polygroup and not the rest of it. So I use that a lot too, especially when you start getting into really fine details and so forth like that. And then everything else default. Now, as far as like the custom brushes I use, I love the Orb Cracks. I've used them forever. 3D Character Workshop. I was a student there years ago. Shane Olson was like my first mentor. And so from there, like his brushes are just super awesome. And also Sakaki or SK brushes. They're really great, good block out, good stuff. So eventually I do sculpt anime sculptures. So I actually love his style of brushes and it's helpful. And then Pablo Munoz's brushes, his ZBrush guides. Those are really, really, really cool. So I actually done those. He has like some good pores and lips and stuff. If you go to ZBrush guides, shout out to him. You can actually see a lot of brushes. He has a lot of stuff for free. I also have the Geo brush here, which is a really cool brush as well, which is like the damn standard, but with Geo settings. That was made by Pablo Munoz. So those are the different things I do. Everything else is default for the most part. My floating palettes, I typically will only put up what I'm using, and then a lot of times I end up deleting it because sometimes I'm in render mode, sometimes I'm in sculpting mode, sometimes I'm in modeling mode, and that menu is kind of organically changing for me. But knowing that I can dock a few different menus, whatever I'm focusing on, like for example, this is a good one to know. If I go here to the picker, most people don't know about this. If I go here to the picker and go to depth, check this out. This is a fun little one. If you're using the curve like multi-tube brush, right? So let's go curve multi-tube. Notice it's set to once Z. So if I do this, right, it's kind of hugging to that shape, but it's identifying the very first shape in which we're doing something. Let's go a little bit smaller. So dragging this out, see, it's only really coming to the first point and then it dig in. So, but if I do continuous Z, now it's stuck. It's continuously updating as I'm moving through, allowing me to have that hug, that shape. So having the picker menu, if I'm trying to get something like refine it, then that's actually what I end up doing for that. So this is actually a super fun, the picker is probably one of the most unused menus, but this is how your brushes work. All your brushes survive on the picker. And so knowing how this actually functions, there's a lot of cool, like little things in here that make it worthwhile. But again, this is organically changing. And when I'm done with it, I just kind of delete it and move on with my life. Hopefully that was helpful. And then of course, I do have some custom brushes down here. Like I said, I kind of have like organic sculpting that I use all the time, blockouts and stuff. And then when I'm hard surfacing, like the topology brush, this is super cool because look, I can build topology on the fly and then tap anywhere and it gives me geo, which is super fun. So I use that a lot, especially when I'm like retopoing in ZBrush or creating fun custom shapes. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else stays default for me. Hopefully that was helpful.
Cool, thanks. And did you were saying you're live streaming after this as well?
Yeah.
So if people have more questions on, I guess, any of the stuff you talked about today or anything to do with ZBrush at all, then join that live stream and ask you questions.
Yeah, if you're on the Maxon ZBrush channel, I just need to like take a small little like 2-minute break, set things up, and then I'll be on there. And we'll be doing some 3D print prep as well. And that also will be on the iPad. So we can continue this conversation over there. If you all want to jump there in a few minutes, that'd be great. If not, hopefully this video was helpful. Again, like Ellie said, this is going to be on the Maxon training team YouTube, and that's where you can go ahead and follow along and kind of get the shapes and stuff. But again, this was made to be a little bit of a nice beginner-friendly approach to how to use not only ZBrush for iPad, but how to make something in the process. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who showed up and gave support and asked questions. It's super important, and I love sharing this knowledge, so thank you.
And we love it when you share this knowledge.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I've also linked to the project files again, just for everyone. They're also in the description of the video, so feel free to access and download that file ready for next week, where we'll be talking about how we can basically animate it and do some fun stuff inside of Cinema 4D, and then how we can light and texture it inside of Redshift. So yeah, I get a lot of questions about texturing glass and how we can do it, how we can make it look nice, the things that we need to do. So what Ian's created, obviously with the thickness of the bottle, we can then create liquid that has to intersect. There are certain rules that we need to do to create realism and accuracy. And so it's going to be a lot of sort of the rules to make things look good, but then we're just going to make them look good as well. So yeah.
Oh, real quick. So sorry, real quick, but I just saw this question right here. Like beginner tutorial recommend. Can you share my screen real quick? I just want to point out one thing and then we can wrap up, I promise.
Yes. It should be. There you go.
Okay. One of the things to know is if you're in a project, it doesn't really matter. Up here at the top right-hand side is a help button. If I click this and I go to tutorials, it's going to launch our YouTube channel, Getting Started ZBrush for iPad. And this has like everything about what's going on for ZBrush for iPad. These videos are like a few minutes long. That's it. I promise they're not too crazy. But this will help you like not only navigate the thing, but this will also help you like if you're just brand new to it, get very familiar with everything that is going on. And yeah, super easy way to do it. And we're always adding to this. As far as like more follow alongs, I want to do more follow alongs like this. So we're going to be, you know, always looking at new series and stuff to help create. And that's where my live streams come in. So just know, yeah, again, if you come up here to, bam, right up here, the help menu, and then the tutorials right here. This will be a way to do it. Also notice there is a support button right here. Again, part of the reason that you're paying for stuff and things is that we have support. So please make sure if something does come up and it's not working right, this button exists and we'll know when something's wrong because you'll tell us about it. And again, that's really helpful as well. So just know that up here, we have a few ways that you can not only get good tutorials, but also too can get some support when you need it.
Cool.
Okie dokie. And we'll slide on back to the inception.
It's okay, we kind of half hit that.
Yeah, perfect.
Well,
awesome.
What we'll do, let's wrap up because we're a little bit over, but that's absolutely fine. This is the standard Maxon Trainers Team YouTube channel style. We love to overrun and make sure we answer everyone's questions. Thank you so much, Ian, for going through that. And thank you for, getting roped into my insane idea of creating a perfume ad for a Creative Maxon live stream. I appreciate it.
I loved it. Thanks for letting me make something super cool and fun. And again, like sometimes for me, like not gonna lie, sometimes like I'm just burnt out on making crazy, complicated projects. And you're like, I need a perfume bottle. I'm like, I'm on it. Like, yeah, I can turn my brain off and just make a thing. And so thank you for having me with this project because you smashed it. The final product, I've shown people some of your renders and they're like, oh, is that a real, like, that's cool photography. I'm like, no, we sculpted that and rendered. So it's a great job.
The bar's set high now for next week.
But thank you for letting me be a part of it. It's super fun. We got to do more collaborative projects like this.
No, we absolutely will. No, honestly, thank you. And like you said, thanks to everyone in the chat, everyone who stayed, watches live, catches the recording, asks their questions. We appreciate it very much. It makes these live streams even better, knowing that, you're enjoying it and you're following along. So I guess we can say goodbye. And are you joining me next week? Are you going to come hang out with me?
I'm going to try to. I'll officially let you know soon. I'm going to try to. If nothing else, just to hang out with you.
That sounds good. But yeah, if not, I'll see you lot on Tuesday and Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. And yeah, we'll catch you soon.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.